Thank you for choosing Grand Skills as your #1 online free professional course creator. For your notice, I want you to know that the instructor of this course has put in so much effort, time and money just to create this content for you to learn all for free. So please do well to click on the subscribe button, turn on the bell notification to all so you will be the first to get our video tutorials we'll be posting at all time. Also give it a thumbs up and drop a comment to help us improve more. Thank you.
Hello, you are welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is Grand Skills International Catering Institute. My name is Oge Chinweke. Today we will be talking on food hygiene. What do we mean by food hygiene? The food we take. Say that what you take in is who you are. So we want to talk about how to make your food hygienic. Unless food is preserved, food deteriorates. If you don't preserve them, they spoil. To keep them in an edible condition, it is necessary to know the causes of spoilage. To keep those your food in an edible condition, you should know what causes food to spoil and how to preserve this food. So today we'll be talking about how to preserve our food. Deterioration is caused by molds. Deterioration, that is food spoilage, is caused by molds, is caused by yeast, and is also caused by bacteria, which causes food to decompose. Bacteria can cause food to smell or cause food to be slimy. So now these bacteria, we want to list them out one after the other. If you are talking about molds, molds appear like whiskers of food. You see the food, it will change color. You will see something like look foamy on top of that food. Those bacteria are called molds. To grow, they require warm moisture. They also require air. They are killed by heat or sunlight. Molds can grow where there is too little moisture for yeast and bacteria to grow. If there is no moisture, the molds cannot grow. But where there is moisture and air, molds always grow. Now, when we are talking about yeast, that is another bacteria that can affect your food. Yeast, these are single-cell organisms, larger than bacteria, that grows on food containing moisture and sugar. Now, when we talk about yeast, yeast also come in food substance like sugary food, like our juice and our fruit juice. Whatever that contains sugar, that's where you always see yeast in it. We also have bacteria. Bacteria, we have 3 types of bacteria that concerns the catering, that concerns the food we eat. We have the helpful bacteria, we have the harmful bacteria, and we have the spoilage bacteria. The helpful bacteria assist manufacturers of items such as such as cheese and yogurt. These bacteria, that if you are producing things like yogurt, you need to allow them, keep it for some time to develop that soured taste a little. Those bacteria are called the helpful bacteria. We also have harmful bacteria, which causes food spoilage and food poisoning. These harmful bacteria, when it occurs in food, is not good for you to take it in because it will cause problem into your system. So these ones are very dangerous. Now we also have spoilage bacteria, which could be seen as harmful, but pathogenic form is also harmful. It could cause illness to the body. So these are the types of bacteria that affect food when it comes to deterioration. Now, we have transference of bacteria. There's so many ways that bacteria can be transferred into our food. Bacteria cannot move on their own. Bacteria can move by hands. If you don't wash your hands before handling food, you could transfer bacteria into your food. Bacteria can also move by cuts and sores and also burns. If you encounter cuts in your hand, in our previous classes, we talked about kitchen accidents. We talked about some minor accidents that could occur in the kitchen, which cut is part of it. So if you have this cut, you are expected to use sellotape to cover your wound, so that bacteria cannot be transferred either from that injury to our food or from your food to your body. Bacteria can also be transferred through cough and sneezing. That's why we say you should not cough over food. Don't also sneeze over food. If you cough or sneeze over food, you could transfer bacteria into your food. We have different types of food. We have unclean equipment, utensils, and work surface. So through this equipment, bacteria can also be transferred into our food. If your equipment is not clean, if you don't wash your equipment properly with hot detergent water, it could carry bacteria into your food. If you also don't wash your utensils and even clean your work surface, it could transfer bacteria into your food. So by doing this, we are expected to clean your equipment, clean your utensils, and make sure that you keep your hands clean at all times to avoid transference of bacteria. Now, bacteria can also be transferred through air. There are some bacteria that could transfer through air. So that's why it's also good for you to cover your food. Whatever that you could put into your body, you should make sure you cover them. Bacteria can also be transferred through water. If you are using unclean water to cook, if you are using unclean water to prepare your food, bacteria can be transferred through that. Bacteria can also be transferred through insects and birds. If you don't cover your food properly, insects can perch on your food and causes bacteria and transfer bacteria into your food. Even birds also, from there, bacteria can infect your food. Bacteria can also be transferred through vermins, through rats and cockroaches. So these are the means where bacteria can also be transferred into your food. So you are advised and expected to always cover your food whenever you are not close to it. Now, poor waste disposal. If you don't dispose your waste properly, it also transfers bacteria into your food. So to avoid all these bacteria, you are expected as a caterer, as a professional caterer, to follow these steps in order to avoid the transference of bacteria into your food. Now, we have cross-contamination. What is cross-contamination? A contamination of transferring bacteria from one place to another. Cross-contamination means that unaffected food becomes contaminated by transference of bacteria from another item or medium. For example, if you are using raw food, a place where you prepare raw food, you did not clean it and use it to prepare cooked food, the bacteria from that raw food can affect your cooked food. So it's always good to clean your working surface very well before preparing your food. Make sure you manage your food properly so that you cannot transfer bacteria or disease to the food you are preparing for yourself or if you are giving to others. Now, we have some types of bacteria that could cause food poisoning. There are some kind of bacteria that will lead to food poisoning. The food poisoning is those food that you eat that will cause problem or damage to your system. Now, when you finish eating them, you start developing stomach ache and start developing different sicknesses. So some of those bacteria, I've already written them. You have the salmonella. It's a kind of disease that is caused by food poisoning. We also have staphylococcus. It's also a disease that is caused by food poisoning. We have Clostridium. Clostridium is also a disease that is caused by food poisoning. And we also have E. coli. All these things are diseases that is caused by food poison. So for us to avoid and prevent these diseases, you are expected as a good chef or a person handling food, as long as you are handling food that people eat, you are expected to have good standard of personal hygiene. We talked about personal hygiene, always bathing, washing of your hands clean, make sure you clean your working surface properly, making sure that you clean your utensils very well, and so on and so forth. So if you are a person handling food, you should have good standard of personal hygiene. Number 2, you should try to eliminate any insects or rodents. If you notice the presence of vermins, presence of insects in your kitchen or where your food is stored, make sure you eliminate them. Don't keep them because they could cause bacteria into your food. Washing of hands, that is number 3. Washing of hands and equipment and surfaces after handling raw poultry. After using handling raw food, raw meat, always make sure you wash and clean your hands and your working surfaces properly. Not allowing carriers of the disease to handle food. We talked about in our last class, if you have any disease that could transfer to somebody, that could be contacted from another person, please don't handle food at that moment, because those diseases can transfer into your food and also transfer into someone else. The use of effective food processing techniques, example, cooking or reheating. Make sure that you use the effective way to process your food. Okay? Now, we want to talk about growth of bacteria. How does these bacteria grow? Growth of bacteria. Now, bacteria multiply by splitting in half. They multiply by splitting in half under favorable conditions for growth. If they have a conducive environment where they eat and grow, they multiply. So they multiply, and when they want to multiply, they multiply in thousands and they multiply in millions. So that's why you are not expected to allow and give room to any form of bacteria, because when they are feeding, if they have dirt where they feed, they grow. Whatever that feeds grows. So anything that is not feeding very well does not grow very well. So likewise these bacteria. So if you give them room to occupy in a place in your kitchen, from there they will multiply and they grow. That is how diseases and infections develop. Now our food needs extra care. Our food needs extra care, and those food that need extra care are your stock and sauces, gravies and soup. Your stock, your sauce, your gravy and your soup, they need extra care. You take care of them very well, you manage them, you cover them. If it's the one that you're supposed to preheat, you preheat them at the normal time you're supposed to preheat. If it's the one you're supposed to store in your freezers, you store them. In doing all these things, we are taking care of your food, and by taking care of your food, bacteria cannot grow. We also have meat and meat products. All those your meat products, you don't expose them like that. You cover them properly, you refrigerate them so that they can be protected from bacteria and infections. You have our milk and milk products. Your milk and milk products, you find out milk always come in a tin. So when you open it, you cover it properly, or you put in your freezer. By doing this, you are preserving them and you are eliminating bacteria and reducing the height and level of bacteria in our society. We also have our egg and egg products. Your eggs, you handle them with care. If an egg is broken, you don't use it. If it's broken, you don't use it, because if you allow a broken egg for some time, you notice that it starts smelling. So if you use those eggs to cook or to produce your food, it causes bacteria and it can affect your system. So by all these food, you handle them with care. We also handle with care all food that are handled and reheated. All those food that you're supposed to reheat, you reheat them. All those food that are supposed to be handled well, you handle them properly. Doing all these things, you are helping to eliminate bacteria and reduce the height of infections. Now I want to talk about the control of bacteria. These bacteria, how do you control them? The control of bacteria. Bacteria, in as much as bacteria grows, you can also control them. There are so many different ways which you can control your bacteria. You have 3 methods of controlling bacteria. These 3 methods include protect food from bacteria in the air by keeping food covered. Once you cover your food, you are controlling bacteria. Like as we talked about, I said before, you always cover your food. This is one method of controlling bacteria. Do not keep food in a danger zone between 5 degrees and 63 degrees for longer than absolute necessary. We said between 5 degrees and 63 degrees. Do not keep food in a danger zone. This danger zone, you said, is 5 degrees and 63 degrees for longer than absolute necessary. If it's a food you are supposed to consume at a particular time, you make sure you consume it that time. If you leave it more than that time, it could lead to an infection. It could lead to damage in your body. So all this food, you don't overkeep them when it's necessary. You also keep subject bacteria to temperature of 77 degrees for 30 seconds. 77 degrees for 30 seconds. You kill the bacteria. Some bacteria have to be killed by preheating the food. Some bacteria cannot stay without heat. So once there is heat, the bacteria dies. The heat kills them. So you kill those bacteria, and by keeping them to a temperature of 77 degrees, as I said, for 30 seconds, or higher temperature for less time. So you need heat to kill bacteria. So these 3 ways are the ways that you can control bacteria. Now we have been able to talk about food hygiene. We talk about different diseases and different bacteria and how those bacteria can be transferred into our food. We also talk about cross-contamination, what we call cross-contamination, different diseases that could result from transference of bacteria from one person to another, or from your working surface to your food, or from your equipment to your food. We listed those bacteria and how to control them. We also talked about the growth of bacteria, how bacteria grow. We said that bacteria does not just develop like that. They grow. Since they eat, they grow. So now we want to talk about food poisoning. Food poisoning. What is food poisoning? Food poisoning is an illness characterized by stomach pain, diarrhea, and sometimes vomiting, which can develop within 1 to 36 hours after eating affected food. Those food that could cause pain to us, they are food poisoning. I will say it again, that food poisoning is an illness that is characterized by stomach pain, those food that you eat and you start feeling pain in your stomach, that could lead to diarrhea and sometimes vomiting. Those are food poisoning. Your system does not accept it. So those food poisoning, we want to talk about them and what we call food poisoning. We said that diseases or dirtiness can lead to food poisoning too. So we also talk about bacteria, how you can prevent them. All those bacteria is what could transfer food, make your food to be poisonous. Okay. Now, when you talk about food poisoning, we can also prevent food poisoning. The prevention of food poisoning. How do you prevent this food poisoning? Prevention of food poisoning. How do you prevent food poisoning? Almost all food poisoning can be prevented. Almost all. You can prevent them. Now, how do you prevent food poisoning? By one, complying with the rules of hygiene. We listed in our previous classes how to maintain personal hygiene. So if you are complying with these rules, you could prevent food poisoning, because we said that dirtiness can affect your food and cause food poisoning. So if you are making sure, if you are following these rules by cleaning and washing of your equipment, you could prevent food poisoning. You can also prevent food poisoning by taking care and thinking ahead, taking care of your body, your environment, and thinking ahead on what to do to prevent this food poisoning. You don't just allow the situation to come before you know what to do. As a professional caterer, you think ahead. You think ahead and know what you are supposed to do at every given point in time. You can also prevent food poisoning by ensuring that high standard of cleanliness are applied to your premises and equipment. By ensuring that high standard of cleanliness is applied to your premises and equipment. Your premises where you stay to prepare your food, the equipment you are using to prepare your food, make sure that you apply high standard of cleanliness, always washing. We listed out how to wash some equipment. There are some equipment you use hot detergent. Almost all the equipment you use in preparing food, you use hot detergent water to wash them. By using hot detergent water, you are killing those diseases that could perch in one place or the other. So once they encounter hot water, it kills them. So ensure that you maintain high standard of cleanliness to your premises and also to your equipment. You also prevent food poisoning by preventing accidents. We talk about kitchen accidents. So by preventing accidents, we are also preventing food poisoning. To number one, high standard of personal hygiene. We keep talking about hygiene, personal hygiene. Personal hygiene is very, very important in the kitchen. If you are preparing food or if you're a food handler, personal hygiene is very, very important, so that you don't transfer disease from your body to a food that you are giving to someone. Pay very, very attention to your personal hygiene. Physical fitness. You make sure you maintain physical fitness so that you don't develop illness and transfer it to your food. You also make sure you maintain good working conditions. Working condition, that is cooking conditions. Make sure as you prepare your food, make sure you follow the rules and regulations that has to do with kitchen. Follow all these rules. It's very, very important. Now you also make sure that you maintain equipment in good repair and clean condition. Make sure that your equipment are always in good repair and they are also in clean condition. So if you watch everything we are saying, we are talking about hygiene. Hygiene is very, very important in our kitchen. Now you also make sure that you use separate equipment and knives for cooked and uncooked food. You don't use the same knife you use to cut uncooked meat, to cut cooked meat when you know you are not putting it back into the fire. Use separate equipment to prepare these things. If you are using a particular bowl to handle uncooked food like poultry or meat, don't use that same equipment to handle fruits which you know that is not going to go back into the fire. So you wash them properly before using the equipment again. Now you make sure that you use separate equipment and knife for cooked and uncooked food. I said that before. Ample provision of cleaning facilities and equipment. Make sure you clean your facilities and equipment properly. In doing all these things, you are preventing food poisoning, because sometimes food poisoning is caused by a low standard of preparation of the food. So make sure you clean your equipment properly. Another way you can also prevent food poisoning is by storing food at the right temperature. Store food at the right temperature that the food is supposed to be stored. If it's the food that requires heat, you store it in a heat environment. If it's the one that requires coldness, you use your deep freezer or your normal fridge to preserve them. Now you make sure that you preheat your food safely. Prepare them or preheat them in a safe way. Another way you can also prevent food poisoning by quick cooling of food prior to storage. Any food you want to store in your freezer, you allow it to get cold before you transfer them into your freezer. You don't carry hot food to your freezer. It's very, very wrong. It could cause bacteria and lead to food poisoning. Also protect your food from vermins and insects. That's why you talk about always covering your food. Make sure your food is always covered. If you are preparing something, make sure you cover them. Don't allow flies, don't allow insects or rats or whatever insect that move around the environment to interfere with your food. It will cause food poisoning, and all these things can lead to illness. You make sure that you follow hygienic washing up procedure. The hygienic washing up procedures we talked about by using soap, hot detergent water to wash your equipment. Follow all these procedures to wash your equipment. Follow the hygienic procedure of cleaning your environment. In doing this, you are preventing food poisoning. Knowing how food poisoning is caused, before you could go ahead in washing and all these things, you should have in mind that this is what causes food poisoning. So by doing this and knowing about food poisoning, as we are telling you now, yes, you know about it, you should know how to control them, which are these steps we are telling you about now. When you control your food materials properly, you prevent food poisoning. Now, carrying out procedures to prevent food poisoning. Now we have talked about this food poisoning. Make sure you carry it out. Don't just hear it and leave it. As you have heard it, put it in practice. Hygiene is very, very important when it comes to catering establishment. If you don't follow this hygienic process, it could lead to food poisoning. And food poisoning is not good for us. Now we also have some causes of food poisoning. Other causes of food poisoning include chemicals having entered food accidentally during the growth, the preparation or cooking of the food. If you use chemicals that is not meant to enter into somebody's human system and accidentally putting it into the food, it could lead to food poisoning. So you make sure that you prevent this from happening, and also prevent the entrance of bacteria such as germs into your food. It could lead to food poisoning. Also prevent chemical food poisoning from occurring. Chemical food poisoning are those chemicals that is not meant for consumption or is not meant to use to prepare food. If you are using those chemicals to prepare your food, it could lead to food poisoning. And those chemicals can be caused by different things. It could be caused by sprays. Those sprays we use in fleeting our houses to kill insects. It's chemical food poisoning. If it enters your food, it's not good in your system. So when you are spraying or you are doing your remediation, you are killing different insects in your environment. Make sure you cover your food properly. If possible, put them in your cupboard or put them in the freezer. The equipment or the materials you are using to cook, your raw food materials, you cover them, or if possible, remove them from the kitchen. When you are finished fleeting the house, you can now store them back. Because if those chemicals enter your food, it could lead to food poisoning. Another causes of food poisoning could be lead from using water that has been in contact with lead pipes. All those are lead pipes. Pipe goes through the ground. So if those pipes are contaminated by chemicals, and if you are using that same water to prepare your food or even drinking it, it could lead to food, it's a part of food poisoning. It could lead to damage in your body. So we should try and avoid all those things. Poor quality enameled or galvanized containers. There are some containers you don't use to store your food. All those poor quality containers, you don't use them to store your food. All those containers that you notice that could, after some time, you start seeing rust in them. If you store your food inside them, those rusts are bacteria. If it enters your food, it could contaminate it. And when you eat it, it's part of food poison. It could cause a problem to yourself. By using copper pans used for storing food, those copper pans, as I said, those pans that could bring out rust, if you use them to store your food, it could lead to food poisoning. Now, other causes of food poisoning can be fungi, all those chemicals too that we use to kill vermins. If it enters your food, like all this rat poison, it could also lead to food poisoning, which is not good in our system. So when we are handling all these things, make sure you handle them properly to avoid food poisoning. Poor prepared cleaning chemicals at incorrect strength. Those cleaning chemicals we use to clean our environment, don't allow them to enter into your food or to enter into the containers you are using to store those food. It could also lead to food poisoning. Chemical food poisoning can be prevented by, number one, you can prevent chemical food poisonings. And the ways which you can prevent these chemical food poisonings, one, the use of properly maintained utensils. If you maintain your utensils very well, your spoon, your knife, your fork, whatever you are using to prepare your food, even your pots, if you maintain them properly, you could prevent food poisoning, prevent chemical food poisoning. By obtaining food from reliable source. If you obtain food from a reliable source, you are preventing food poisoning. Most times you see where they cut meat, and those meats are exposed. You see fly perching on them. You see even the malam that is cutting the meat will not wash their knife properly. Look at the table where the meat is being cut, very dirty. All these things could lead to food poisoning. So to avoid this, you obtain your meat, your fruit, or whatever food materials you are using to prepare your food. Obtain them from a reliable source where that is clean and conducive. Don't buy your food stuff anyhow, so that you will not contact disease or infection. All these things are part of food poisoning. Now we have infestation. Infestation can also be caused by inadequate cleaning. If you don't clean your environment properly, you could get this infestation. Infestation by carrying, we mean by transferring bacteria from one place to another. So if you don't clean your equipment or environment properly, you can encounter this infestation. Infestation can also be carried by poor building maintenance. If you don't maintain your building very well, infestation can occur. If the building is poorly maintained or you don't maintain it at all, you begin to notice flies, you begin to notice cockroaches, you begin to notice vermins. So all these things can transfer bacteria from one place to another. By supplier's delivery, know the type of supplier you are using for delivering of your food. So if you are doing all these things, you can prevent food poisoning. We also have rodent infestation, which can be caused by rats or mice contaminating food. We have insect infestation, include flies, cockroaches, beetles, and silverfish. So we talked about rodent infestation. Rodent infestation can be carried by rats or mice. We have insect infestation. It could be carried by fly or cockroaches or whatever that flies around. this insect infestation can occur from that. Now, how do we prevent these infestations? We said that to prevent infestations, rats, mice, cockroaches, flies, other insects, birds must be controlled. For you to prevent infestation, you control all these insects, you control all these vermins. By so doing, you are preventing infestation. Now, you make sure that your buildings are sound with no holes or structural defects whereby mice or rats can enter the premises. Make sure you maintain your buildings, close up every hole where mice, where rats or cockroaches can penetrate to enter your environment. By so doing, you are preventing infestation. Another way we can also prevent infestation is by use of screens on windows to keep insects and birds out. Use glasses on your windows, so from there insects will not easily penetrate, rather than using wood. So if you use glasses, it will prevent insects by entering your environment. Now you also install ultraviolet electrical fly killers. If you install all these fly killers, you're also preventing infestations. You also have no narrow space between equipment and fittings and no false bottom. Make sure there's no holes between your equipment, your mixers, your oven. Make sure you close up, make sure it's tight, it's tightly covered. Your equipment you're using to store your food, make sure that it's tightly covered. By so doing, you are preventing infestations. Another way you can also prevent infestation is to store all food supplies off the floor. Your food supply, your raw food materials, don't keep them directly on the floor. You can store them in your cupboard, you can keep them on top of something. Don't keep them directly on the floor. If you keep them on the floor, insects can penetrate and infest and cause infestation to your food. Another way you can prevent infestation is to keep all food in lidded containers where practical. Make sure that all the containers you are using to store your food is well tight. Use container that is well lidded, that is well tight to store your food. By doing all these things, you are preventing infestation. Another way you can also prevent infestation by not allowing waste to accumulate in your kitchen or outside your kitchen. Don't accumulate waste. Always dispose your waste. No matter how little, throw it away. Wash up your waste basket. By doing all these things, you are preventing infestation. Because if you accumulate waste into your kitchen, flies can penetrate, mice, cockroaches can follow those waste and enter your kitchen and infect your food. Another way you can prevent infestation is to keep all waste bins with lids on. Make sure that your waste baskets are always covered. By doing all these things, you are preventing infestation. Also employ a pest control contractors. Once in a while, employ pest control. Let them spray everywhere and manage your environment. By doing all these things, you are also preventing infestations. Now we have been able to talk about food poisoning, prevention of food poisoning, causes of food poisoning, and infestations. So I think we should be going on break now. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to put it on our comments box. This platform is here to attend to everything that has to do with catering. So if you are finding anything difficult, always write to us. We will make sure that we answer those your questions. We are here to build you up and to make you a better caterer that you are supposed to be. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Oge Chinweke.
Thank you for choosing Grand Skills as your #1 online free professional course creator. For your notice, I want you to know that the instructor of this course has put in so much effort, time and money just to create this content for you to learn all for free. So please do well to click on the subscribe button, turn on the bell notification to all so you will be the first to get our video tutorials we'll be posting at all time. Also give it a thumbs up and drop a comment to help us improve more. Thank you.